Well, let's start with a big story that is just coming in, where Russia has struck ISIS targets in Syria once again. Now, the cruise missiles were launched from the Russian submarines in the Mediterranean Sea. And also, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, Russia fired 7 Kalibr Cruise Missiles at the Islamic State targets southeast of Deir ez-Zor. The Russian Defense Ministry has said that all targets were hit successfully. Now, the Russians are helping the Syrian government forces liberate the region from the so-called Islamic State. And for more on this, we are joined in by my colleague Daniele Pagani, who's been watching all the developments very closely. Daniele, now Russia has said that it has hit ISIS targets with 7 cruise missiles. How do you read this development?
This is actually part of the ongoing offensive. The Russian air forces, the Russian forces, the maritime forces have been fighting alongside President Bashar al-Assad at least since 2 years. So this is not a surprise to me. It's always surprising when you think that these missiles have been launched from the Mediterranean Sea, which is hundreds of kilometers away from Deir ez-Zor. So this kind of throws a bit of light on the potential of the Russian military. What is happening right now is that this is what I would define the final military push against the Islamic State in Syria. The Islamic State in Syria currently controls, I would say, 2 large cities. One is Raqqa, north to Deir ez-Zor, and one is Deir ez-Zor, south to Raqqa. Raqqa is their, let's say, self-proclaimed capital city in Syria. In Raqqa, the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is an alliance made of Arab and Kurdish fighters supported by the US, are on the ground fighting. They have reached the old city, which means they control half of what was once the capital city of the Islamic State in Syria. The Syrian army, but also the Syrian Democratic Forces, have now joined the offensive in Deir ez-Zor, and the Russian air forces and the coalition air forces are all attacking Deir ez-Zor, a very oil-rich area where the Islamic State still has a stable presence.
And also, considering the fact that the so-called Islamic State in Syria is virtually on its last legs, how long do you expect this fighting to go on, which we are being given to understand is going on neighborhood to neighborhood, street to street? Is it the most bloodiest part of the battle that we've reached in Syria?
Perhaps yes, in Syria, definitely not in the Middle East. The battle to retake the city of Mosul was way worse. Raqqa is smaller than Mosul. The Syrian Democratic Forces are pretty well trained exactly when it comes to guerrilla fighting. They're very good. They come from a tradition of guerrilla fighting, so that is actually what they normally do. Nevertheless, a guerrilla fight in a typically Arab city made of small lanes and strict roads and narrow roads, it's not easy to fight. It's really, you well said, lane by lane, house by house. Every house potentially contains a threat or a small commando of Islamic State. When it comes to the amount of time, given the fact that it took from November to conquer half of the city, I would expect it to be at least in months. Of course, impossible for me to say exactly how many, but I would say months at best.
Right, Daniele, we'll have to leave it there. So this is the latest development, where Russia has fired 7 cruise missiles as it has struck targets in the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor.